In the summer of 1965, the Army's 497th Port Construction Company arrived in Cam Ranh Bay to begin constructing the first new pier. In early October, they started work on a 400-foot-long fuel jetty, constructing it from wood and timbers. They also laid a pipeline that would carry fuel from the tankers to the air base 10 miles away. Both were completed by the 1st of November, the arrival date of the first fighter aircraft of the 12th Tactical Fighter Wing, or the 12th TFW. Further up the bay at the peninsular village of Mi Ka, Army engineers built an 1,100-foot float bridge, allowing direct access to the mainland. Meanwhile, on the U.S. East Coast, DeLong Corporation was busy fabricating floating piers for Cam Ranh and other Vietnamese ports. These patented piers would shave critical months off the construction time of traditional on-site pier construction. Towed in sections, a 2-month voyage brought the piers to Cam Ranh in early November. 45 days later, with the assistance of DeLong technical representatives, the 497th Port Construction Company completed the installation of a 90 by 300-foot pier, doubling the port's capacity. DeLong Corporation was contracted to install the next 2 piers, each 600 feet long. Meanwhile, Army engineers built the connecting causeways, abutments, roads, and hardstands. When completed, the port had more than 3,000 linear feet of bulkhead, making it one of the largest ports in the country. In late 1965, construction began on a deep draft ammunition pier located a safe distance from the others. Finally, 4 shallow water piers were also added to the port. While the seaport was under construction, a civilian construction consortium was busy building the airport. The consortium, named Raymond, Morrison Knudsen, Brown and Root, and J.A. Jones, was better known as RMK-BRJ. It undertook similar projects throughout Vietnam, employing tens of thousands of Vietnamese on these and other projects throughout the duration of the Vietnam War. Cam Ranh's airport plan called for a single 102 by 10,000 foot concrete runway capable of handling jet fighters and large military aircraft. The runway was built northeasterly across the flat sandy center of the peninsula from the bay shore to the seashore. Like the port's pipeline, its completion also had the 1st of November deadline. Military planners soon determined that a second runway would also be needed at Cam Ranh. With the first fighter aircraft scheduled to arrive on the 1st of November, there was no time to build another concrete runway. Instead, the second runway, equal in size and parallel to the first, would be constructed of AM2 aluminum plank. That work began on the 22nd of August. Before laying the plank, the sand needed to be stabilized. First, the sand was flooded with seawater, then compacted with rollers so it could support earth-moving equipment. After grading, it was sealed with a bituminous material. Plank laying began in late September. The runway was completed on the 16th of October. After that, a parallel 10,000-foot taxiway, high-speed turnoffs, and a 60,000 square yard operational apron, all in AM2 plank, were completed by the November deadline. Totaling nearly 3 million square feet, it was enough planking to build a 2-foot wide footpath between San Francisco and Los Angeles. In addition to the runways, RMK-BRJ also undertook the construction of the associated hangars and other buildings of the U.S. Air Force Base. Located on the southeastern side of the runways, it would become home to the 12th Tactical Fighter Wing and numerous tenant organizations. In February 1966, the U.S. Air Force deployed one of their Red Horse squadrons to Cam Ranh Bay. The 400 men of the 555th Heavy Repair Squadron, known as Triple Nickel, took on many of the construction projects originally scheduled for the Navy Seabees, Army engineers, and their civilian contractors. The Air Traffic Control Tower and the 14th Aerial Airport, operated by the U.S. Air Force, were constructed on the northwestern side of the runway. The aerial port would handle air cargo as well as in-country and R&R passenger flights. The Army's 6th Convalescence Center, built along the seashore north of the runway, became operational on the 16th of May, 1966. Under the command of the 44th Medical Brigade, it would provide convalescent care for medical and surgical patients, including combat wounded. On the average, it would have 1,000 patients at any given time, the majority being admitted for malaria. At the same time, a short distance northwest of the 6th Convalescence Center, construction began on the 22nd Replacement Battalion, one of two such battalions in Vietnam, the other being the 90th Replacement Battalion at Long Binh. Army soldiers would regard them with either dread or joy, depending upon whether they were arriving or leaving Vietnam. In early 1966, construction was well underway on the 504th Field Depot, which would be responsible for providing supplies for the southern part of II Corps. Besides constructing a camp for 6,400 logistics personnel, Army engineers and contractors would build 1.4 million square feet of covered storage, 1.2 million feet of open ammunition storage area, and bulk storage facilities for over 775,000 barrels of petroleum products. In January 1966, construction at Cam Ranh was expanded to include a 1,600-man Army airfield and cantonment at Dong Ba Tin, located across the bay on the mainland. Built by the men of the 20th Engineer Battalion, it would become the home of various Army aviation units during the course of the war. It would also be home to another unit of the 509th Radio Research Group, Detachment 2 of the 330th Radio Research Company. By July, the engineers would complete construction of Dong Ba Tin, as well as the nearby headquarters of Korea's Blue Dragons. In a quiet little cove on the peninsula's southeastern tip, Navy Seabees began constructing the Naval Support Facility, home base of the U.S. Coast Guard's Swift Boat Coastal Division 14 and Coastal Squadron 1. Overlooking the mouth of Cam Ranh Bay from the highest point of the southwestern tip, the Seabees built a small base for the Navy's Inshore Underwater Warfare Group 1, who arrived in April 1966. Numbering only about 50 men, the IUWG would patrol the port entrance area in picket boats, landing craft, and Boston whalers in an operation codenamed Stable Door. They were also purported to have used dolphins to detect enemy divers. In the beginning, the shore facilities at Cam Ranh Bay were extremely limited, requiring interim measures to support assigned naval forces. Until mid-1966, when shore installations were prepared to take over the task, messing and quartering of personnel were handled by APL-55, anchored in the harbor. To provide electricity for Cam Ranh, the Army awarded a contract to Venel Corporation, who constructed, operated, and maintained Cam Ranh's electrical systems, including 4 power ships. As troop levels grew, another 14 diesel generators would be installed ashore, a good portion of its output used for powering personal electrical devices that soldiers would purchase from the post exchange or elsewhere. Another Army contractor, Pacific Architects and Engineers, was hired to perform general repairs and provide utilities support. By mid-1966, the seaport, airport, and depot complex were essentially complete and had cost over $145 million, of which $55 million came from Army appropriations. As time passed and troop levels grew, new facilities were built while existing ones were expanded or improved, adding millions of dollars more to the cost. By some estimates, the total American investment in Cam Ranh's infrastructure would be close to $250 million.